As I begin, I would like to first talk about, of course, the purpose of education. And there are different definitions, but to me, the most important would be to know oneself. I think that's a quest which has been a human quest across all civilizations at all times, because the ultimate journey is not outward, the ultimate journey is really inward. And therefore, an education that can help us discover who we really are and why are we really here and how can we contribute in a meaningful way to society is really important. It's really something like an alignment with your soul purpose, S-O-U-L, soul. And I think in the whole humdrum of existence, of what we get pulled into by societal expectations, etc., we lose that somewhere. And that pops up now and then and creates a lot of existential crisis in many of us. So I think schooling is a foundation for us to create the space to help a child discover his or her life purpose. And how can we really do that? I hope my presentation will at least touch upon some aspects. I'd like to begin, of course, with a tribute to my daughter, who left us, who left the physical dimension in 2014. And that, of course, propelled us into a very different understanding about life and afterlife. One thing that she said in her poems that we discovered later on, she left at the age of 12. And I'm putting this poem because she wrote about who am I. And this she must have written when she was 10 years old. And she's written, who am I? Am I a human? Am I an animal? Am I a soul or just a body? But though now I lie in this bed, one day, I will be on my own feet running, and all of my dreams will come true, but I still have to find who I am. So, you know, this is coming from a child, and she's speaking to us from another dimension today, from another realm. And I know that this is what, as a very enlightened and spiritual soul who blessed us during these 12 happy years, I think that's what she wants to tell other children, because she was extremely happy. Happy at the education, happy in the family. So education doesn't prepare us for two things. There are two taboos in education. One is sex, the other is death. And yet we have to go through, you can avoid one, you can avoid the sex part, you can't avoid the death part. And education doesn't touch these. It doesn't help us prepare how to live our lives meaningfully and how to prepare for the moment of that transition joyfully. So, you know, she was aware of it because she said, I'm always happy and smiling, you're always happy and smiling. But one day, we will separate, my dear friend. So the fact that we're here for a short time, whatever number of years we have, how can we meaningfully lead our lives and in a happy way? It's important. I say this because I know how devastating, only a parent who's lost a child can understand the deep grief and pain that we have to deal with every moment. But I think my grief, I realized, was even less than those parents who lost their children to suicides. I happened to be with some of them in Ahmedabad. In a span of 3 weeks, 12 to 15 children in Ahmedabad city committed suicide before the board exams. And this time, they were not children who were failing. These were children who were getting 70% and above marks. Any system that can drive a young child to take this extreme step is a system that we cannot continue with. We cannot accept this as a kind of a collateral damage, that just because thousands of kids can pass out of it, while few don't. Try explaining that to those parents who sit there wondering what happened. And some of these parents were not people who were pushing or putting pressure on the children. It's a system that generates it, but it's an anonymous thing. Therefore, I think it's important that we begin to explore alternatives. And this enlightened gathering today by such speakers and you people who are on the same quest because you're here, you've chosen to be here, I think should mark the beginning in this country of a new way of thinking and being as we head to a new time. So we have to know where we're coming from as we head forwards. And I think one of the most important things is, of course, to realize that we are coming from a model. The models that we inherited due to historical and other reasons is, of course, the prison model of schooling. And Michel Foucault, who's a French writer, I often quote him, he does compare the prisons and hospitals and army and schools, and you'll find that they have the same things. The timetable comes from the prisons, the uniforms come from prisons, the cell structure, that is a way of seating, the seating arrangement comes from prisons so that children don't interact with each other, and of course the subjugation of the body. If you can control the body, you can control the mind. So this fixity is of course part of the architecture of the classroom. And if your architecture of the classroom is like that, then you can be rest assured your pedagogy will also be like that. And you will fall into the trap of, well, what do you do? A lecture, and you do a question and answer method. And remember, the question and answer is actually, if you're questioning, you're always questioning from a position of authority. And who does that? Who questions really? It's a police. When you have to interrogate somebody, it's a police that puts the other person in a psychological disadvantage by questioning. And we don't want classrooms where the teachers question. We want a classroom where children question. And you know, I originally belonged to Delhi, and my father was a Sardar. And the best jokes are told by Sardarjis themselves on Sardars. And he told me this, I remember this funny joke when I was a kid. He used to tell me that, you know, there was this Kartar Singh. I'll have to tell it a little bit in Hindi because it's funnier. So Kartar Singh school में बैठा था, और उसको मास्टर जी ने पूछा कि वो करतार सिंह उठ, जरा बता रामायण किसने लिखी थी? और बेचारा करतार सिंह बेचारा एकदम घबरा के उठ के बोला, मास्टर जी मैंने नहीं लिखी थी. So master ji said, कि बदतमीज इंसान है, चल उठ इधर आ. And he took him to the principal, headmaster साहब. ओ हेडमास्टर साहब, इसको देखो, बड़ा बदतमीज बच्चा है. मैं इसको पूछ रहा हूँ महाभारत किसने लिखी थी और ये बता ही नहीं रहा, ये बोल रहा है कि मैंने नहीं लिखी थी. So the headmaster got worried. He says, कोई बात नहीं, मास्टर जी बैठो. Went to the child. Said, वो करतार सिंह, वो तू बैठ जा पुत्र, तू बड़ा घबराया हुआ है, कोई बात नहीं, पानी वानी पी ले. Then he goes back to the master and says, मास्टर जी, ऐसा एक बच्चा है, घबरा गया है, उसको प्यार से पूछो, मुझे यकीन है लकी इसी ने है. Okay, so you know that's the point about question and answers. You know, it doesn't really lead us to a deeper understanding unless the child is really in that position. The other part about our school is that it is also a school which is alternative. It is a PPP model. It was started with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. It's a municipal school that gives an IB education, international baccalaureate, education to the underprivileged, to the middle class, and of course to some elite students, which helps us cover the costs. When we started the school, of course, we had a massive problem with a lot of agitations, bus burning, blood signature campaigns, mobs, riots that were spreading from city to city. Then suddenly it was a big political thing between Sonia Gandhi and George Fernandez and the local government and local councillors, both BJP and Congress and whatever. It was a huge thing, and a public interest litigation was filed, and finally, of course, you can see this is just one day. They had jail bharo andolan, civil disobedience, riot control police was there, and PIL was filed. They lost that, and finally, of course, we were able to start the school. So what I'm saying is that no project is easy to begin, but once a school like that exists, perhaps it will pave the way for more schools to come. The point about the school is, of course, equity in education, inclusive, and to that extent, we have children who are coming, of course, from very underprivileged backgrounds. We have children who are differently abled, and of course, we don't take any interviews, we don't ask questions when the children come in. So you can see at the bottom, the last photograph below, that's the area, a slum area from where a lot of our children have come. And before the RT happened, we had 20%. We'd already factored in 20% children to join us in education, in our school. So of course, one of the main thing about the school is that it's a democratic school. The children make their own rules. So when they join the school, they decide what they want their rules to be, and they have council meetings, and in that council meeting, they have all the conflict resolution. So that is part of the framework of the school. There's only one given, which is that non-violence. You know, they can't be violence. That's really important. The other point is now, of course, the frameworks are there. I mean, a lot of philosophers have spoken about the framework of education. It's all there in the books. The whole question is, it boils down to classroom practice. How do we really conduct or construct a classroom in a coherent and meaningful way? And so that it, you know, like she was saying, children feel that I like doing the other things. I love sports, I love dance, I love my annual function, I love all the extracurricular activities, but classroom study is boring. And everybody believes it's a kind of an injection to be, you know, taken like a vaccination, or it's a bitter pill to be swallowed, so everybody must go through it. We went through it, so they must go through it. Not really. I think you can make it so much more fun and enjoyable. So one of the things, well, we did was for want of other terminologies, we called it generated resources learning. And we said that the definition of this is really that it ought to be purposeful and meaningful education. Why am I doing this at all? Children have a right to ask, and we must ask ourselves, what's the point of writing this essay on a visit to the zoo? It's just going to be filed, right? And the child knows it, and that's why they're not motivated, because they know at the end of the day, this is an arid exercise just to fulfill some academic claims and aims. But ultimately, how useful is it going to be for me in my life? But if you're doing things that have meaning for the children, they have high levels of intrinsic motivation. Of course, we all agree, I think everybody who's here, that it ought to be experiential, using the senses. I said in the presentation, before, that we don't want only the 5 senses. I'm even going beyond and saying the 6th sense, the extrasensory perception should be there in education. The intuition, can we develop, nurture the quality of intuitive learning and intuition? Can we expand our consciousness to be much more, working at a deeper level, to become more aware? Of course, interdisciplinary. In our school, there are no fragmented subjects. We don't talk in terms of, you know, English and maths or whatever. They do a project, and while doing those projects, they learn different cognitive skills. Of course, skills and abilities. We do know that nearly 85% of the graduates in the IT industry are unemployable, and 75% in general are unemployable. So what's really wrong with our schooling? We do need people. We're going to have a major problem of unemployment because it's not that there's lack of jobs, it's that they're unemployable. They have no skills or very low skills. The other thing is, of course, sustainable use of best available resources. It should be a pedagogy that any school can follow within its own cultural context. And active, the children should be active, reflective. It should have links with real life. It should not be an artificial situation that we put our children in, because they're very clever, they know it's artificial, it's simulated. So as much as real links with in real life situations, that really gives you natural links to skill development and other cognitive subject areas. And of course, whatever you generate as an outcome, it should be something that can use for further learning. I mean, what's the point of my making this whole model in wood and thermocol, which is not probably eco-friendly, but whatever I may have done, I get it's exhibited, and then what? It goes into the dustbin, it goes home, what do I do with it? So, every resource that is generated by the children should be a stepping stone for it to be used further by the group or by another group. So yeah, this was just a kind of a random rough diagram I had drawn. What do we mean by experiential learning? Dewey defined it as interaction between self and environment. So here you can see that the self, the school environment consists of the class, the different spaces, faculty, society, institutions around. There's a natural environment. So if you explore the links and you identify issues that you're facing, children are facing, can they write an RTI letter? Can they, cooperate with the municipal corporation to do an awareness campaign, etc.? Then you are creating resources which are through, the different actions that can take place are campaigns and films, etc. You're creating resources which are meaningful, and you're actually creating a much more meaningful learning. Just to give you an example of resource, here we use the floor. We are a small school, and more than the blackboard, the floor is the largest space we have. So we don't have benches and chairs. The desks go up on the wall, and we're using the floor to make maps, to build our sustainable cities, to do a lot of different things. The project, I'll just give you one or two quick examples. So you can see one of the most easy things to do is really to kind of run the cafeteria project. So you have, any school can do this. We just run it under a tree with a gas cylinder and a cooking stove. And you have children making lemonade, these grade 7 children. And what they're doing is just understanding equations, binomials, polynomials with different proportions of sugar and water and lemon, making each other taste, noting down their own data that is coming. So the data is generated by the kids. It's not artificial data of Ramu goes to the market with 20 kilos of potatoes or whatever. It's actually their data. And then they begin to look at what do they really eat in their own tiffins, and they analyze that, they make their charts, they decide their own symbols, and from there they begin to understand that we need to maybe eat in a healthier way. So they source recipes, asking grandparents, other people, internet, decide on what they want to make in the cafeteria, for how many people, calculate the costing, profit and loss, volumes, proportions, measures, go make the purchases, they borrow some money, come back, make it, etc., and of course sell that food. And by doing all of that, they are actually, it's an interdisciplinary way. You're looking at language as well as all the other, cognitive subjects, math, science, hygiene, everything. And value systems, you can see children are making laddus for Raksha Bandhan. They go out and they tied it to a rag picker who had never ever interacted nobody had even looked at him, in fact. This is just a rough mapping of the project. We can't really see it very well. I've not been able to expand it, but it is just a mapping of a teacher who has done it on identity and culture. And one of the aspects is initial representation, prior knowledge of the children. How can we look at toys, traditional toys, the timeline of toys in Indian culture or other cultures, etc., and then make films. So it's a large mapping. I'm saying that because filmmaking is another project that we do very easily. Today we have more gadgets. When we started off, we were doing with cardboard cameras, etc. And in that, you have script writing, you have physics with the lighting, you have sound with the acoustics, you have technical things like you can see right now, things, editing, softwares, etc. A huge amount of skills that children develop while doing films. And of course, the assessment also, it would be here you can see just a mapping that the children have done of the editing process only, and that itself is a huge exercise. And of course, the assessment would be also kind of making a social film on cases that they're doing. Yeah. Let's see if this one works. This is just one of these advertisements that children have made, and this is a very old ad. Now this is a 10-year-old ad made just 10 years back, and this girl is from a municipal school who joined us. Today she's a fashion designer. So it's still relevant what she's done. And that, the point is that, yeah, children did make different advertisements. Later on, we made it with even the Election Commission. So here you can see children made short films, they made mascots, they made posters and jingles, and they actually interacted with people coming from Election Commission on voter awareness. And the pamphlets that they made actually went to 7.5 million voters across Gujarat, and a general resolution was passed in the country to make Voter Festival as a national voter festival. So, these kind of things where children are actually engaged with the real life professionals means that the skills that they're developing are of high professional and real standards, and not just make do, things in your own classroom situation. So to create those opportunities, of course, this project itself went on to win a national award. So the impact that the children had, both for the school and for at their own individual level. The other thing is, of course, if learning can be made interesting, then so should evaluation. And here we have an exercise that was done. The elections were going on in Gujarat itself, and we just created our own political parties, etc. And what you see here is a collective evaluation. The evaluation was a manifesto written by every child to come and deliver that on real issues that their community faced or the school faced in any language. What's interesting here is that Zohair, who's giving the speech, joined our school because he was hearing impaired due to an accident. And here he's giving the speech, and today he's finishing his PhD in political science at the University of Rochester. So that's his journey, actually coming from the class projects that we've done. We noticed that a lot of our children actually went to find their calling in life, and that's very important. Here I would like to show you just a brief case study of this girl, Chandrika, who joined us from municipal school again, and she finished her IB education in the school. She found that she liked to do filmmaking through the projects. We started a BTech program. She joined that. You can see her learning. She then went on to UK to learn further, you know, in kind of editing. And you can see that today she's a teacher at our school, and a lot of our own students have become teachers. But what's really nice is that, yeah, she says that she discovered her passion for filmmaking and was able to realize it. So discovering that, and the fact that to create opportunities for children who are coming from different backgrounds. I'm showing her case because, well, her father is a plumber, but for her to have had an IB education, be a graduate, etc., and to change lives and to come back to teaching, in a time when people say, you know, children don't want to get into teaching. Yes, they do. If they enjoy learning, they will. And this is another child who is now a professor, and when she joined the school, every morning she used to vomit and then wear her uniform and then go to the school. And then her father shifted her to our school, and she says, I've become outgoing, expressive, confident, inquisitive, and focused. Isn't this what real education is supposed to do? And I like that because we have to keep in mind, what is the real purpose of education? Is it to pass an exam? And yes, the exams are there. They are a stepping stone to get to the university. But what is really the real purpose is inner transformation. It is this connect that you can feel within yourself. Of course, when you do a project, ours is a very small school, less than 300 children. But you know, a small experiment can actually have a large impact. Before the RTE happened, everything that went into the RTE Act was actually, did emanate from our school. All the different points, including the 20% became 25%. We also were the first to actually fight with the government of India and bring the Ministry of External Affairs under the Right to Education Act. And 60 children every day would write letters to the Ministry of External Affairs asking why the visas were not given to the foreign faculty, young teachers of our school. And that whole battle lasted a long time with Central Information Commission, etc., HRD Ministry, MEA, Home Ministry. I mean, I have a whole files, and that became our project actually, to get our teachers back who were denied visa on wrong grounds. And we did, we won that battle, and through that, of course, we got the ministry as well under RTI. The Youth Voter Festival came, you know, through the children's efforts, and of course now the teacher trainings we are expanding. The pedagogy, what's really important is and that classroom construction is an art. And I believe that if the teacher doesn't undergo a transformation during the teacher training, if she doesn't feel excited and it's not fun for her, and then there's no real motivation. If you're not transformed, there's no point. You're not going to bring that energy to your children. So I think I'd like to probably end, let's see if we have time for the short film, but I'd like to end with Tara's quote again. And she said, the world we say, the world we said, the world is a big place and I'm small, but I matter because I am matter. And I think when she wrote this at the age of 10, she understood something really important. A, that we are in a physical incarnation, and B, that as long as you're in this incarnation, each child is important. And I think that's Tara's message through me, to a larger community, that every child is important, every child matters, and is our education giving value to every child who is in the system? Not really. Mostly it caters to a very elite small percentage of children who are able to sort of navigate the system. But can we give value so that my identity and my sense of self is not my grades and not the marks that I get, but it is something much more deeper, which is really who I am through the work that I do, through the abilities and skills that I have. And the day we can do that, no matter what grades we get, the day a child can stand up and say, you know, I don't get 80 or 90%, but I know what I have to do with my life. Somebody has to be a musician, somebody has to be a carpenter, somebody is a great dancer, somebody is a great speaker, whatever. People need different you know, abilities. So I think today's session, I would like to really recall that for the children who are losing their lives, you know, through the system, which is taking so much of, putting so much of pressure, we need to find alternatives. And I hope that today's and tomorrow's day will give us glimpses into different practices across different schools, through the leaders, the founders, and through the journeys, all of us, I think we can create a collective endeavor to begin a movement in coming from the land, from the country that has been the seat of learning through the centuries. So I think that time has come, and that time is really now. Thank you very much.